And thank you for being here today, Minister, and for taking these statements on International Women's Day. The theme, you've stolen my line, we have the same first sentence. The theme for International Women's Day is choose to challenge, and it indicates that a challenged world is an alert world, and with challenge comes change, or from challenge comes change. My challenge is about who's making the decisions and who has a seat at the table. I want to begin by stating the words of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are made." To be fair, I believe that doesn't just apply to women. I actually believe that all those who are affected by the decision should have a seat at the table, and that we should have diversity and inclusion across all of Parliament and the legislature especially. I was introduced to speaking out for women when I was a very little girl, and a new church was opened in Clondalkin where we then lived. The priest announced from the altar on the first Sunday that he was looking for volunteers from the men to be readers at Mass, and he was looking for women to volunteer to clean the church. My mother was the sole objecting voice that found that announcement offensive and challenged it. It took the voice of a woman to point out the blatant stereotyping and discrimination. It took a pregnant woman to sit at the cabinet table before the blatant discrimination of the lack of maternity provision for politicians is getting a proper debate and resolution. Let's remind ourselves that this is 2021. We will shortly celebrate 100 years of the foundation of the state, and that the very function of reproduction of our population, maternity leave for legislators, still isn't an entitlement. Similarly is the case for councillors. Arrangements need to be put in place to address their needs around having children and childcare, an issue I urgently want addressed. Throughout the crisis, women have been disproportionately affected in terms of their sexual and reproductive health. For example, it is difficult to get a determination from the Department of Health as to whether travelling for IVF is deemed essential or non-essential, travelling abroad that is. And for a couple desperate to have a baby, when time is ticking against them, it is no doubt an absolutely essential journey. The review of the Health Regulation of Termination of Pregnancy Act has commenced. 3 years on and still women have to travel. This needs to be addressed with the review. Who will be at that table and who will conduct that review? There are matters still outstanding: access to contraception, ensuring that sex education is universally and uniformly taught in Ireland, and that the safe passage into a clinic to a doctor for a woman who is seeking abortion services in Ireland. In the review, we need to make sure that no one is left behind. Similarly, with the assisted human reproduction, without ensuring that the right voices are at the table, we may well walk into passing an impotent law that disenfranchises most of those who are in need of it. Right now, the Oireachtas is preparing to bring forward the Assisted Human Reproduction Bill. The current commentary by the AHR coalition is that the legislation as proposed is not fit for purpose and completely ignores the calls from groups most affected by the provisions within it. Those groups include Equality for Children, LGBTQ groups, Surrogacy Ireland, Families for Surrogacy, 221+, cystic fibrosis advocates, and the National Infertility Support Group, as well as many, many others. The proposed scope for surrogacy within the bill is extremely limited and does not pay sufficient cognizance to the real plight of families wrestling with infertility, either medically or socially caused. There is pre-approval, there is only altruistic, there is only domestic provisions within, as well as a raft of other rules. What about the women survivors of cervical cancer who are excluded from bearing their own child? Are those born without a uterus, or those wrestling with infertility where the cause is undiagnosed, who have been abandoned to the unregulated private medicine? To those single women who want to access IVF services, to all those longing to be parents, what of them? They are going to be left behind with this piece of legislation that proposes a regime that has been in operation in Canada and the UK for some years, and both countries have it currently under review because they have shown that in the acting out and the playing out of the legislation, it isn't fit for the purpose and the manner in which it was designed. And what of the mothers of surrogate-born children who are not recognised as mothers by our state? They were given some comfort and status by the Children and Family Relations Act to be designated as custodians, as guardians. But they remain susceptible to the precarious whim of their spouses for even that unsatisfactory legal status relationship with their much longed for and loved child, the child they have nurtured since before its conception and through no fault of their own could not carry in their own wombs. What of the children already born via surrogacy and citizens of this state who are left in a precarious position with regard to their entitlement to that mother and to their inheritance rights from that mother? We are leaving all of them behind. We are at a juncture where the legislation as proposed is written by those who, by the stroke of fate, have no need of it, and is set to ignore the voices of those who are most crying out for it. And why? Because the most affected are not at the decision-making table, and the discourse about them is sometimes only short of branding them as child abusers. Today, I welcome and embrace the theme of International Women's Day. Today, I'm choosing to challenge. If we are to live in a truly inclusive society, one that legislates for ethics, not morals, one that is truly a just society, we must ensure that the voices not at the table are heard and that they are acted on. I want to end with a poem written by a mother of a surrogate-born child. A woman who was unable to carry her own child. And it says, "Not flesh of my flesh, nor bone of my bone, but very remarkably, all my own. And never forget, for a single minute, you weren't born under my heart, but in it." So to those women who have wrestled with their fertility, I dedicate this day and my speech today. Thank you.